Okay, great. Well, we're going to start out the webinar today by asking you all to share a little bit of information about where you are in your project. So if you could, and I'll just call on you guys. I'll go through the attendee list and call on each of you so that not everybody kind of talks at once. And just if you would share kind of where you are in your project in terms of you have your position description written, you are, you have a group of volunteers, you have an idea for who your volunteers will be, just a general update on where you are. And then also if you have kind of specific questions that you want to pose for the group, you can either say those now, and then I will record them, and then we can have a discussion at the end of the call, or just start thinking through what those questions that you want to pose to the entire group are, and we will have some discussion time at the end of the call. Okay? And if you are not, just kind of the general webinar etiquette, if you are not speaking, go ahead and if you would put your phone on mute so that we don't hear a whole lot of background noise. That would be great. All right, so, showing no favoritism here, I'm just going to go down the list. And Hannah's Treasure Chest, so are Nikki or Sarah on? And would you share just a little update about where you guys are? And Nikki and Sarah, if you are talking, we cannot hear you. So again, Nikki or Sarah, I'll give you just a couple seconds. We can't hear you, so if you're on mute, go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, we'll move on. We'll come back. How about Hope and Megan from Cincinnati Arts Association?
Morning.
Morning.
So we have a position description, and we have given it to one of our board members who is doing some research, trying to connect to her company and Great American Insurance. And it's been 2 weeks and I haven't heard back from her. And given that she's our board vice president, I'm not trying to push, but I may reach out next week just to see how we're doing. And then if I don't get movement from her, I think we're going to go to Plan B, trying to recruit.
And what's your Plan B, Megan?
Yeah.
What's your Plan B?
No, I know. It is off the top of my head. I forget. It's written down somewhere, and I apologize. It will probably include volunteer match as well, just to see if we can double our efforts. But it would be another of our sponsors. I believe it would be with Duke Energy, trying to connect with them.
Great. Thanks so much. Let's go to Jess Sparks from Girls on the Run. Jess, could you give us a brief update on where you guys are?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. So Elika and I put together a project description and put it into PowerPoint slides. And Rebecca, we shared it with you and Margie for review and any kind of feedback you might have. We have a couple of groups that we're going to be sharing it with. One is the group that we're already partnered with through a program support initiative for Girls on the Run at JP Morgan Chase. And then another group, which some of the other groups may want to reach out to, and it's a group through Ohio State. And they're students, so they're not necessarily a corporate partner, so I don't know if that gets the blessing, but the student group is from the Fisher College of Business, and it's the, let's see, Students Consulting for Nonprofit Organizations. And they spend a semester and they select 8 to 10 clients. You have to go through an application process, but it's called SCNO at Ohio State, and they solely focus on helping nonprofits with skills-based projects. So development, fundraising, marketing plans, things like that. So if our 2 corporate groups that we're going to reach out to, one is one of our board members who works at Huntington Bank within their PR department and has some connections to the marketing department, or our connections at Chase will reach out. Our focus will be our digital communications plan for strategic volunteer recruitment.
That's great, Jess. Thanks. And it sounds like you have lots of different avenues to pursue and a few backup plans. So that's great. Thanks so much. And we did get your description and feedback will be very soon.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yep. How about Jody Landers? Do you have an update for St. Joseph's? And Jody, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Great. Okay. Yeah, we have created a job description and identified 3 volunteers from City who have agreed to take on our project. Yay! So
that's awesome.
one concern that we did have, that they had initially was the time commitment over a shorter period of time. So we agreed to space our project out over a longer period, but still within a year. So that was just kind of something that we sort of had to work out and navigate with them. But we came to an agreement that works for everybody. All 3 of the volunteers are military veterans, so they offer kind of a different, fresh perspective to our project and to our employees. So earlier this week, we invited them and took them on tours of 2 of our campuses. So they had a chance to interact with some of the staff and interact with some of the kids and hear more about the different roles that the staff members play, and I think kind of start to get an idea of maybe where some of their assistance is needed, and that they could start to maybe generate some ideas about some things that they can bring and that they maybe would be able to cover. So we used the Serve Ohio idea for a kickoff gift, and we put together goodie bags for each of them that had, like treats and some St. Joe's swag in there. I think they each got a T-shirt and maybe a keychain or something. So that was fun. And so our next step would be we're going to provide the volunteers with some data from some surveys that were completed by staff members. Matter of fact, we just finished our last staff satisfaction survey to wrap up the fiscal year. So we have that for them. And to also identify some staff members that they can like interview and speak with to get some more detail sort of across programs, whether it's education or day treatment or, outpatient, or, there's a million to choose from. So that's kind of where we are. Things are cruising right along.
That's great. Yeah, it's great to hear the success that you have, and you've got your team of volunteers, and it sounds like they're committed to the project. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. Yes. So all good on our end.
Great. All right. How about Stephanie Toman from Teach for America?
Hi, I'm here with Philip as well. We are feeling good about our project. We completed our project description and got some feedback from Margie and Rebecca that was really helpful with the direction we're going in, and are working on our kind of full detailed description to have for people as we're recruiting. We have a handful of regional board members who have offered or expressed interest in helping us recruit volunteers for skills-based volunteering. And so we'll be sharing this description with them in August. It's kind of like the timeline that they were open to help us kind of get some people in for this project. Once we have those people, we'll give kind of more detailed information about the project and then get it going hopefully early fall. And so we're really looking forward to it. I think as we've been working more on it, those in our kind of leadership team are really excited about doing lots of skills-based volunteering. And so we've had to, for me, the conversations have been less about getting buy-in and more about explaining like the work that goes into it and that we can't run 10 projects at once. So we're feeling really good here in Cleveland.
That's good. So your leadership has drank the Kool-Aid.
Yes. No, they're all in on it.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you. How about Steve from Nature's Nursery?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, you and Margie and I talked earlier in the week, and I had a meeting set up for yesterday with a potential partner, and I got stood up on my date.
Oh no!
Oh, bummer.
I'm not gonna let on who it is to the group because that wouldn't be nice. So we'll see what happens. But I was prepared with, pretty good outline of what we, the project that we kind of came up with, and I think I'm just gonna go from here. And if I have to drag it out of this individual, I'm gonna go elsewhere with the same thing because I still have the need. But that's where I am. I was really excited to have an update for everybody, and nope, no update. So that's where I am. But I have some sound ideas that are gonna be able to translate to whatever organization I try to connect with next.
Thanks for that update, Steve. And we can certainly help you and brainstorm some ideas on other potential partners, moving forward. So hang in there.
Yeah, minor.
Yeah. All right. Let's go back to Hannah's treasure chest. I think you've got your audio going.
Hi, this is Nikki and Sarah. Can you hear us now?
Yes.
All right, awesome. As we emailed Rebecca and Margie last week, we've had a little upheaval. Our administration has changed. So we are kind of the most senior staff here right now, despite being here for 3 months. We've learned since our director left the agency that we had our proposal done to do a market study, and now we're learning there are much more pressing issues. So I am reworking it currently and through this weekend to change it to bring in an IT person that could help kind of untangle the spider web of IT we have going on, so that when we get a permanent executive director, right now we have a retired physician who is a longtime friend of the organization serving as interim executive director, and we are just kind of realizing that none of us know much about technology, and there have been a lot of patches put on things. So we are looking to bring someone in who can get us streamlined. We do have a couple of local businesses that we have good relationships with, that once I have the proposal completed and run by Rebecca and Margie, I'm going to reach out to, we have a group from Avery Dennison, that is just getting ready to give us money, and they want to get into volunteering with us. We also have personal connections that are in the IT community. So we have an idea of where to go, but it's been changed like 3 times. So we're kind of not trying to be flaky, but it's kind of working out that way right now. So we're reworking our proposal.
Thank you for that update. And as you kind of move forward and putting together a new project, please keep us in the loop and let us know how we can lend support.
Yeah, definitely. That's kind of my goal for this weekend. I have moved positions, so technically I am now the volunteer manager, where previously I was doing more development. So I'm wading through 4 months of unanswered volunteer applications. So this weekend I'm planning on doing the SBV at home.
Okay. Well, thank you for your commitment to continuing on with this, and it sounds like you can really get some value for things that you need, you know, with.
We're hoping so, yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Is there anybody else that wants to share anything before I kind of transition this over to Margie? Okay, great. Well, thank you all for sharing. It's great to hear an update from everybody, and we're excited to have some additional content to be able to give you some help, and also a really great guest speaker. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Margie, and she will introduce our guest speaker.
Great, thanks so much, Rebecca. I want to thank everybody for being so forthright and sharing kind of where you are and what your challenges have been. As you can see, you know, everybody's experiencing some bumps here and there, but Rebecca and I have been reflecting on just really how pleased we are with everybody's progress, and that folks are really kind of really moving along, and that you continue that energy and excitement for just around the possibilities for skills-based volunteering. We're actually internally reflecting as a team this week about just some processes and challenges. And when we initially launched this process, Rebecca and I, or sort of Ohio Common Impact, we had a lot of questions around volunteer recruitment and where do we find the right volunteers, and it seemed like that felt really top of mind for folks. And what we're seeing now is that really the biggest hurdle, the biggest learning curve is around that scoping the projects and identifying, translating your organizational needs into a discrete, concrete job or position description. And then once you have that, it feels a bit easier to actually connect with volunteers. The volunteers are there. There's some great groups, connections, individuals, companies, existing volunteers that you can connect with, but it just is kind of getting really zeroed in on how they can plug in and how you message that. So just my overall reflection. And again, I just want to thank everybody for their hard work and being so forthright in sharing out that information. I'm really excited to introduce one of my colleagues, Suzanne Salerno, and I'll allow her to share a bit about herself, but wanted to bring in a guest speaker who has an additional kind of lens and deep knowledge and experience of both skills-based volunteering and corporate social responsibility. And she's going to kind of go over, well, I won't steal your thunder, Suzanne. I'm really excited to have, again, her share her perspective on kind of these next steps that you all are embarking on. So it's going to be reinforcing a lot of the concepts that we shared at boot camp, but of course, Suzanne bringing in her amazing background and knowledge and experience with this. Suzanne leads many projects and sources and scopes many projects for Common Impact, so has a real grounding in this work. So Suzanne, thanks again for being here with us. I'd love if you don't mind just telling the crew a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I am speaking to you from Boston, Massachusetts, and I've been with Common Impact for a little bit over a year, but I've been working, as Margie said, both in the nonprofit sector and the corporate sector for well over 20 years. I, in the nonprofit space, spent a significant amount of time at the public media station here in Boston, WGBH, working on fundraising, capital campaigns, board recruitment and development, governance, as well as working in the private sector focused on philanthropy, social impact, and corporate social responsibility. I actually was one of the, amongst the many benefits of working with Common Impact this past year, it brought me to your state of Ohio for the first time ever last year. So I got to visit the JP Morgan headquarters there in Columbus. I hear many of you mentioning Chase as one of your ideas. I love hearing that all of you are really thinking about how to further engage with your existing corporate partners as a result of this project. So kudos to everyone. And thank you for sharing all of that background. What we thought we'd do today is really think through, it's good to hear you are all kind of well into and have your project descriptions and you're on your way and thinking through how to connect with volunteers. So today's conversation will be about, as you're completing those steps, what's next in terms of managing through your skills-based volunteering project. So if we want to skip ahead to slide 3, I think, Rebecca, that would be great. So how we've thought about this today to help you get ready for next steps. We'll talk about writing a project requirements scope. Think about how to schedule your kickoff meeting. Prepare a timeline and talk about coordinating regular meeting schedules. So on slide 4, so really thinking about, you all just mentioned that you really getting to the point of either you're finalized or just about finalized with your project descriptions. So the next step there is really thinking about a deeper dive. How do you take that project description and put a little bit more substance to it so that you have, once the team is ready to get started, this will have the full detail to share with your volunteer team. You would want to have this type of document completed in time for your kickoff meeting, and it's something you would share with the volunteer team prior to having a kickoff so that they can kind of do some homework. Let's talk about the purpose of that. So what you want to have in this project requirement document is something that's going to guide your volunteer team and yourselves on a really specific focus on what is your need. You've come together as a group here with Serve Ohio and with Margie in thinking through some really specific capacity building projects that you could use help with as an organization. This document will continue to outline and also create the expectations for both your team and the volunteer team. And I think it really is a good foundation for the volunteer team to work with. There will likely be moments where they're getting together as a team, either internally, if you are working with one corporate partner and a team there, they'll have some internal meetings, and this can be their guide along the way when they're not physically or virtually in a meeting with you all. And I heard Rebecca and Margie both mention some of the challenges can be on scope creep, but this also helps to really keep you within the parameters of a project and to help outline the key milestones for you and the team to work across. And it's a good project management tool to have. This looks like it can be a Word document. You can also use, I heard some of you mention PowerPoint. It can be in either of those types of formats, but it will take what you've done with your project description and start to really build a little more meat around each of the areas that you've identified in that document. Any questions on a project requirement document? And we should say, feel free to either post them in the chat, or I think it will jump in if you have a question along the way. We're happy to answer them. Okay, we'll move along. Oh.
Yes, as long as Suzanne's okay with it, I can definitely, with the recording, send out a copy of this PowerPoint.
Yes, and Margie and I also we can also send along a kind of outline, a further outline Word document of what a project requirement might look like as a guide. So after, along with the project kickoff, I would start to, as soon as you feel like you've got your team aligned, because dates, as we know, are always challenging, and it's important to get calendars aligned now. So you should start to think about scheduling a kickoff meeting. And this meeting is really kind of that excitement moment. It's the first gathering of the two, both your nonprofit team as well as the volunteer team. I would be sure to think about it as a moment to further engage your volunteers with your mission and your organization. You may think about a time, is there something in September, for instance, that would be a good opportunity for a group of volunteers to really experience your organization and mission in person, and then to continue on, perhaps they see something along a tour or some portion of aspect of your mission, and then you move into a meeting space and begin the kickoff meeting, or vice versa. This meeting is really about kind of getting to know each other as a team, and to start to prepare a discussion on your project descriptions. In that meeting, you will kind of go through and do a presentation on your project vision. This can, again, be a simple PowerPoint presentation. You want to, and then carve out some time for what we call some initial discovery questions. So, and actually, Jody, you were very helpful in reminding me that in addition to a project requirements document, you'll also start to think about some other items you might send to the team in advance for kind of homework ahead of this kickoff meeting. That allows them to do some pre-reading, pre-thinking, to come to the kickoff meeting with some questions for you, and to use that time together to really start to understand the project and the further steps they're going to take as your volunteer team in getting you to an end deliverable or product. At the same time as you start to think about that, scheduling that kickoff meeting, you also want to begin the conversation with whoever might be the point person on the volunteer team for setting up a regular check-in meeting. It's very good to have that time set on the schedules from the get-go. Even if it's just a quick check-in weekly, it provides that opportunity to make sure things are moving forward, to answer any questions, and really make sure everyone's on the same page. I know from my own experience, for instance, for a couple projects we are working on, that piece, if that is not set, you can kind of get off track pretty quickly within a couple weeks time period. So utmost importance to get a full team meeting on everyone's calendars right away when you're ready for kickoff. Also be sure to share if there are times when you on the nonprofit team are not going to be available. For instance, whether you have vacation time, or there's some sort of big event happening, just so the team kind of knows when you will and won't necessarily be available to work on this, and same on their part. So that's the kickoff meeting, and it's a really exciting moment because this is what you've been working on across this summer, for instance, to think through a wonderful project idea that will really work with skills-based volunteering teams. You're thinking through who to continue an engagement with volunteers, and this is that moment to come together and really start the project. And to celebrate your organization and have a team, whether they knew you already, this is a way to further enhance their connection with you, or if you're just getting to know them, it's a way to introduce the organization to a team who may have heard of you through, for instance, their corporate, their company's participation or support of you, but this is your moment to get new people involved in your organization. Another document that you'll want to prepare, and this is a sample, it doesn't have to look like this, but this is a good format to think through, is then the timeline. So I've gone through and set this up as if you were having your kickoffs in September, which I think is the plan. And I've done this as if it's some sort of marketing collateral project. So you want to have this prepared for the kickoff meeting. And it's something you can continue to work together with the volunteer team, but kind of making sure everyone's aware of here's our start date and our end date, and how we're going to work across the parts of this project during the defined time period. In this case, I was using a 4-month project example from September to December, as you can see there. Okay, I think we move on to slide 7. So those are kind of the recommendations we have on next steps and best practices. But let's think a little bit further as you're starting to define that volunteer team of the importance of collaboration to make this project a success. And some of these are to allow you to think through getting comfortable with these types of engagements with a volunteer team. So number one, it is important to be direct. So the team that you are pulling together now and that you are engaging, they won't be able to build a project for you that's successful without your input along the way. So be sure to be open with them, guide them if something is or isn't working or doesn't sound like it's going to be a successful product for your team and organization to implement. They'll want to hear that, and then also they may have some feedback on listening to perhaps why you might say, I'm not sure if that will work. They might be able to give you some guidance on best practices and ways to have some slight changes to make it a successful implementation into your organization. Certainly, as you know, be flexible. You're working across a lot of schedules, and that is always a challenge. So, but certainly be prepared to be available for questions. If it's a corporate team, for instance, they could be working on this outside of regular business hours. So that may be something to think about in terms of making yourself or whoever is your nonprofit team lead available for questions. And it's important to have a process so that your team on the nonprofit side knows when this project is timeline is set for, and that you're able to carve out the time to get back to the team on any questions, on areas where they might come to you with a draft for your review, that you're able to get back to them within a specific amount of time so that you can continue to keep the project on track with the team. One thing to note, we have said, you know, it's great to try to have a kickoff meeting in person, but depending on locations, distance, etc., you can use a platform similar to what we're using today as well for these types of meetings. So we like to guide, and I think it's important for some point during the project to have that in-person time with your organization, but other times along the way can certainly be phone calls and you know, web-based platforms to have check-ins. Certainly works as well. I saw Margie answering a question, but I might have missed it. Gotcha. Okay, next slide, if there's no questions. This is a little bit of additional guidance on thinking through how to make sure you're setting yourself on course for success. As we said, kind of that project requirements document is a key guide. For example, yesterday I had a moment where there were some questions from a team. This was on a technology-focused project, and where technology can get challenging is in customization versus purchasing and inputting data into an existing platform. So we had to refer back to our project requirements document to understand, in this particular project, were we talking about selecting an existing vendor and helping guide the nonprofit on training and how to onboard that platform? Or were we talking about, did we agree to customizing, to building something unique? That's where it got, the project requirements document was such an important piece for us to have, because we confirmed that we had talked about, we wanted to select an existing vendor technology platform and train and help the nonprofit get on board with that platform. So that's where the having all of these tools that Margie and Rebecca are guiding you all on are important pieces to have to help lend to a successful project. And make sure that you're, as we said, spending time to review the work that you're receiving, and schedule feedback points so that both if you need to, I heard a couple of you mention going back to your leadership and getting that buy-in, understand what points they might want to have a review of whatever it is that your projects are, so that you have enough time built into the schedule for either a board member or an executive leader to review steps along the way as well, and have some moments for feedback. And certainly involve as many staff members from your organization who are subject matter experts as need be. They might not be at every meeting, but if there are points along the way, do that. I see a question here. Yes, so how is the project plan different than the project timeline? So great question. That timeline I showed you back a few slides, it can actually be dropped right into the project plan document. And then if you can either have it confirmed leading into the kickoff meeting, or it's something you can, as a group, confirm that this is the schedule that you're thinking about. So it's kind of can be one page within the larger project requirements plan. Does that help? I don't see the name, but I see Cincinnati Arts Association. Great. We can go on. Oh, okay.
Kind of. Suzanne, I'll hop in here. You know, Suzanne has shared the kind of structure that we typically utilize for our project requirements document, and also kind of a project timeline. She structured it in a word art format, and we typically do that as part of a kickoff meeting to kind of give teams and stakeholders a visual of kind of here's what the timeline looks like. If it looks, if you want to structure it in a Word document that way, if you want to just list out the steps, you're welcome to do it that way as well. You're seeing a kind of a couple different versions or snapshots of what the project timeline would look like, but you're certainly welcome to structure it in whatever way lends, in whatever way lends itself best to, how you operate. So if it makes more sense to just write it out and as opposed to translating into a word art or something like that, that's also fine. I think that diving into that project requirements template will give you a really good sense of how we typically lay out the timelines. Megan, does that answer the question, or were you talking about more kind of the content?
Well, I wasn't sure if project plan was different than the timeline, because it feels like the project requirement document felt like our plan, and the timeline was part of that. So I wasn't sure what the distinction was. I think where I'm struggling is that you guys are giving examples, and I feel like we're supposed to be fitting into those examples, and I feel like we just kind of did our thing, and I wasn't sure if we were missing part of it because you're using your templates and we're doing kind of our own thing because that's how my brain works.
Yeah, I understand. And Rebecca, definitely feel free to kind of jump in or we don't have an expectation that things have to be in a very specific format. We have provided on the resource page a lot of different tools and templates. If you find that structure helpful, great. I think it's been, at this stage, it's been very important to go through the exercise of getting a project documented and thinking through the various phases. So, and I've seen yours, and so, although it's not in the exact same structure, it's great, it's fine. So if things are looking a little bit different, based on, maybe you all use some internal project management tools or, something like that. If you want to structure things in a little bit of a different way, that's fine. I think what's important, all of these best practices that Suzanne is sharing, kind of if you're embracing the spirit of them and incorporating, again, kind of some kind of documented expectation of a timeline in key phases, then that's certainly okay as well. But you're not required to use the exact templates we're providing. We provide them as just as a tool and as a resource to support you all.
Yeah, I'll absolutely echo that. I mean, we're not going to, this is for you and for projects that are going to help you build your internal capacity. So the templates are a great guide, but if there are things that can work better for you, or it's, in a different structure based on your organization, that is absolutely fine and encouraged.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Great. Well,
Go ahead.
ahead.
Any other questions?
Great. I think we just had one more of just thinking through, you know, how to, and all of these tools, as we've said, are guidelines and also ways to help you manage through any potential challenges. But one of those is whether, in whatever format works best for you, having all of this kind of written in a format that spells out what the project is and what your hopes are at the end of the engagement with the volunteers helps you avoid what I'm sure Margie and Rebecca have already mentioned of the scope creep. But one idea there is, if there are ideas that are coming up as you start to meet with the team, certainly have a place to kind of parking lot those ideas, put them on a list for other projects, put them on a list for additional phases of this project, for example. But as you, as the nonprofit lead, use these tools to help you stay on track with what is specifically been part of what you've written to date as your hope for this project. You also want to make sure, you know, we've talked about this, but just keeping all of these pieces on track is going to help you stay engaged with your volunteer team and help them feel like they are contributing and participating in a way that is going to add value and capacity to your organization. And as we said earlier, be sure to be comfortable and confident in talking openly with this team as you're engaging volunteers. And they're there to also learn your organization, to build on their own skills and expertise. For instance, if you're partnering with a group of corporate volunteers, they may never have worked in a nonprofit organization, and there are certainly differences, and you have that expertise to share with them just as much as they have skills to share with you. So this is certainly a moment to have constant open conversations with the team and enjoy the learning opportunity that you're about to set up with your volunteer teams. So I think that's kind of what we were hoping to share with you today as you get ready for these next steps in the project. Happy to answer any other questions.
And we've got everybody on, we haven't intentionally muted anybody. So if folks do want to speak up and ask any questions, definitely feel free. That was wonderful, Suzanne, and it was great to hear your perspective and kind of unique experience as well with all of the projects that you've managed and things like that. I particularly loved the concept of wanting that project requirements document being something that the teams will utilize when they're not in the room or in a meeting with you, and that's that is a very helpful kind of a benefit, and I think lends to that. So again, I'll kind of pause there and see if folks have any questions.
This is Jess from Girls on the Run. Suzanne and Margie and Rebecca, how much redundancy between documents and information presented is helpful versus when it starts to get a little just not useful? Because I know some of our like the project requirements document might cover some of the things, and the project template, you know, it seems like we might be restating what we're working on and what our parameters are and those things. You know, how much is too much versus it's good to make sure that it's restated a couple of different ways and a couple of different documents. Just interested about that. How much of that do you see in a successful partnership?
Yeah, I'll jump in here, and then Suzanne, definitely feel free to
Sure.
provide your perspective. But Yeah, Jess, that's a really astute point, and we think about that as well. That it does feel a bit redundant. So I think about when we think about the different documents that we're referencing. So you've got your project description, and you can think of that as like a recruitment tool, right? So that's kind of the 1 or 2 slides of a PowerPoint that we're using to share with potential corporate partners or share with potential volunteers to recruit them and onboard them onto the project, or gain their interest and ensure that they feel like a good fit. And then when we think about that project requirements, that's then that big, it's going to be a longer document. It's going to have a lot more content. You're restating the main ideas, but again, adding a lot more content and detail around them. Once we transition to that phase where we're utilizing the project document, the project description doesn't really come into play that much anymore. Just because, okay, we've transitioned to this, this is our detailed plan. And so that's what we're utilizing. As Suzanne shared, it's helpful to review the project requirements at the kickoff meeting, or encourage folks to review it ahead of time and then come to the kickoff meeting with questions, and it does feel a bit repetitive, and I think that's okay. And you can kind of recognize that. Like I just, okay, I recognize that this is feeling repetitive, but I just want to make sure we're setting the right expectations and being very clear. So that's kind of my perspective there, Suzanne. I don't know if you have any thoughts on kind of what or how you like to sequence those.
Yeah, and that was excellent, Margie. Description. One other way to think about it too, Jess, is some of the specific items that you might be saying in your project description that you're sharing to kind of recruit. It's almost as if take a couple of those specific items and you're then building out more context right under it. Bullets of how do you think you're going to accomplish reviewing some marketing materials in the first phase, or how do you think how would you like to have a new brand piece put together? So it's adding to it rather than starting a totally different document is how I like to think about as well.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. I like the idea of using, like Margie said, that project description is like a recruitment tool. If we like to use Steve's dating analogy, it's kind of like your Tinder page, your match page, and then the project requirement document's more like your first meeting, kind of getting to know each other in more detail kind of situation.
Yeah.
All right, great. Any other questions? Wonderful. I hope folks are seeing my screen. Suzanne, we only have a few minutes, so I want to thank you again for joining us today. I know that Suzanne has worked behind the scenes on pulling together some of the content and resources for the bootcamp as well, particularly the tools and resources around developing corporate partnerships, which I know was generated some really robust discussion at the bootcamp and has been of real import to your project. So a huge thanks for all of that. And I'm going to, in just our last few minutes, I want to unveil something that we're very, very excited about at Common Impact, which is a very much an open source tool that we hope, the goal is for it to be a one-stop shop for all skills-based volunteering. And so it really, for you all, you're in a unique position in that you've gone through this boot camp experience with us, and have access to ongoing support from Common Impact and Serve Ohio. But we at Common Impact recognize that there are thousands of nonprofits that are interested and excited about engaging in skills-based volunteering, but just might not be quite sure how to start. And so some of you might be familiar with a tool that was called the Readiness Roadmap. And this is kind of that next iteration of that tool. And in addition to a overview of and kind of description of the best practices and steps in SBV, it also serves as a bit of a project management tool. And I know we only have a few moments or a few minutes, so I'm gonna go through this fairly quickly. I'm going through a few slides that we use to just kind of share some of the to share a bit about a quick overview of it. But I also wanted to show you all the website as well. And so it's a really, really comprehensive tool. And so what I'll do is I'll start at kind of the beginning and I'll just go through. As you can see, it takes you through each of the stages in an interactive way. And so for folks that are new to skills-based volunteering, they can kind of come to this first step and learn and get a bit of an overview, and then kind of understand if they're organizationally ready. What I think is really neat about this is it helps to also take you through, so you see that I clicked on the shape your project. And it'll take you through scoping a project, valuing and assessing the project. So where you see these kind of tool logos, it's an actual interactive tool. And so we've got lists of different types of projects, the steps that would take. And then if I click over here, I can actually start a new project. I happen to be logged on, and so you have the ability to create a login ID, password, and it's going to take me through a series of questions. Our organization is working to develop a new marketing plan. Right now, here's what we're doing to meet the goal. Here's where we would be going. And so as you can see, it really prompts you through all of the different questions, the phases that you would go through, as well as the skills. And so I know that this is something that we've had a lot of questions about. And so it would be a great tool for folks to just get a good sense of skills. And I recognize that we're at time, and I know probably some of us have an 11 o'clock. And Steve is excited about this rocks. So the link, it's Capacity Commons. I'm putting it in the chat window now. I really encourage you all to go to it, check it out, visit it often, and I'll pause there and see if folks have any questions about it at all. There we go. I'm trying to put it in the chat window. Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. I'm going to turn it back over to Rebecca to close this out and for next steps. But again, capacitycommons.org, and we'll share that info in a follow-up call as well. But a great place to also kind of start thinking about what those next projects might look like. There is also a really neat tool and links to, I know that several of us have volunteer groups that we're connecting with. But here you'll see, here we go, lists and links to potential pools of volunteers. So if folks are having trouble finding volunteers, these are literally links right to places like Taproot Plus, Catch a Fire, and those types of different places. And now I promise I'll stop talking and hand it back over to Rebecca.
All right, thank you, Margie, and certainly thank you, Suzanne, for the great content. And so we're a little bit over. I'm just going to pause and ask if anybody has any dying last-minute questions before we close out. Okay, great. So thank you all for the monthly calls. We'll continue with those monthly calls and get updates from you at that point. If there's anything that comes up in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to Margie and I, and we're happy to help. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend, and we will talk soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.